This is A Course in Miracles, Manual for Teachers, Part 16. How should the teacher of God spend his day? To the advanced teacher of God, this question is meaningless. There is no program, for the lessons change each day. Yet the teacher of God is sure of but one thing: they do not change at random. Seeing this and understanding that it is true, he rests content. He will be told all that his role should be, this day and every day. And those who share that role with him will find him, so they can learn the lessons for the day together. Not one is absent whom he needs. Not one is sent without a learning goal already set, and one which can be learned that very day. For the advanced teacher of God, then, this question is superfluous. It has been asked and answered, and he keeps in constant contact with the answer. He is set, and he sees the road on which he walks stretch surely and smoothly before him. But what about those who have not reached his certainty? They are not yet ready for such lack of structuring on their own part. What must they do to learn to give the day to God? There are some general rules which do apply, although each one must use them as best he can in his own way. Routines as such are dangerous, because they easily become gods in their own right, threatening the very goals for which they were set up. Broadly speaking, then, it can be said that it is well to start the day right. It is always possible to begin again should the day begin with error. Yet there are obvious advantages in terms of saving time. At the beginning, it is wise to think in terms of time. This is by no means the ultimate criterion, but at the outset it is probably the simplest to observe. The saving of time is an essential early emphasis which, although it remains important throughout the learning process, becomes less and less emphasized. At the outset, we can safely say that time devoted to starting the day right does indeed save time. How much time should be so spent? This must depend on the teacher of God himself. He cannot claim that title until he has gone through the workbook, since we are learning within the framework of our course. After completion of the more structured practice periods which the workbook contains, individual needs become the chief consideration. This course is always practical. It may be that the teacher of God is not in a situation that fosters quiet thought as he awakes. If this is so, let him but remember that he chooses to spend time with God as soon as possible, and let him do so. Duration is not the major concern. One can easily sit still an hour with closed eyes and accomplish nothing. One can as easily give God only an instant, and in that instant join with him completely. Perhaps the one generalization that can be made is this: as soon as possible after waking, take your quiet time, continuing a minute or two after you begin to find it difficult. You may find that the difficulty will diminish and drop away. If not, that is the time to stop. The same procedure should be followed at night. Perhaps your quiet time should be fairly early in the evening, if it is not feasible for you to take it just before going to sleep. It is not wise to lie down for it. It is better to sit up, in whatever position you prefer. Having gone through the workbook, you must have come to some conclusions in this respect. If possible, however, just before going to sleep is a desirable time to devote to God. It sets your mind into a pattern of rest and orients you away from fear. If it is expedient to spend this time earlier, at least be sure that you do not forget a brief period, not more than a moment will do, in which you close your eyes and think of God. There is one thought in particular that should be remembered throughout the day. It is a thought of pure joy, a thought of peace, a thought of limitless release. Limitless because all things are freed within it. You think you made a place of safety for yourself. You think you made a power that can save you from all the fearful things you see in dreams. It is not so. Your safety lies not there. What you give up is merely the illusion of protecting illusions. And it is this you fear, and only this. How foolish to be so afraid of nothing. Nothing at all. Your defenses will not work, but you are not in danger. You have no need of them. Recognize this, and they will disappear, and only then will you accept your real protection. How simply and how easily does time slip by for the teacher of God who has accepted his protection. All that he did before in the name of safety no longer interests him, for he is safe and knows it to be so. He has a guide who will not fail. He need make no distinctions among the problems he perceives. For he to whom he turns with all of them recognizes no order of difficulty in resolving them. He is as safe in the present as he was before illusions were accepted into his mind, and as he will be when he has let them go. There is no difference in his state at different times and different places, because they are all one to God. This is his safety, and he has no need for more than this. Yet there will be temptations along the way the teacher of God has yet to travel, and he has need of reminding himself throughout the day of his protection. How can he do this, particularly during the time when his mind is occupied with external things? He can but try, and his success depends on his conviction that he will succeed. He must be sure success is not of him, but will be given him at any time, in any place and circumstance he calls for it. There are times his certainty will waver, and the instant this occurs, he will return to earlier attempts to place reliance on himself alone. Forget not this magic, and magic is a sorry substitute for true assistance. It is not good enough for God's teacher, because it is not enough for God's son. The avoidance of magic is the avoidance of temptation. For all temptation is nothing more than the attempt to substitute another will for God's. These attempts may indeed seem frightening, but they are merely pathetic. They can have no effects, neither good nor bad, neither rewarding nor demanding sacrifice, healing nor destructive, quieting nor fearful. When all magic is recognized as merely nothing, the teacher of God has reached the most advanced state. All intermediate lessons will but lead to this and bring this goal nearer to recognition, for magic of any kind, in all its forms, simply does nothing. Its powerlessness is the reason it can be so easily escaped. What has no effects can hardly terrify. There is no substitute for the will of God. In simple statement, it is to this fact that the teacher of God devotes his day. Each substitute he may accept as real can but deceive him. But he is safe from all deception if he so decides. Perhaps he needs to remember, God is with me. I cannot be deceived. Perhaps he prefers other words, or only one or none at all. Yet each temptation to accept magic as true must be abandoned through his recognition, not that it is fearful, not that it is sinful, not that it is dangerous, but merely that it is meaningless. Rooted in sacrifice and separation, two aspects of one error and no more, he merely chooses to give up all that he never had, and for the sacrifice is heaven restored to his awareness. Is not this an exchange that you would want? The world would gladly make it, if it knew it could be made. It is God's teachers who must teach it that it can, and so it is their function to make sure that they have learned it. No risk is possible throughout the day except to put your trust in magic, for it is only this that leads to pain. There is no will but God's. His teachers know that this is so, and have learned that everything but this is magic, and belief in magic is maintained by just one simple-minded illusion, that it works. All through their training, every day and every hour, and even every minute and second, must God's teachers learn to recognize the forms of magic and perceive their meaninglessness. Fear is withdrawn from them, and so they go, and thus the gate of heaven is reopened, and its light can shine again on an untroubled mind. To the advanced teacher of God, this question of how should the teacher of God spend his day is meaningless. There is no program for the lessons change each day. He will be told all that his role should be this day and every day, and those who share that role with him will find him so they can learn the lessons for the day together. And I love that so much, and that basically takes the control out of our own hands and puts it in the trust of God in a way. And as an example, yesterday, I had a couple of beautiful interactions that were so unexpectedly perfect. One was a conversation with a friend where it was just sort of guided to have a conversation, but neither of us really knew what we were going to talk about. We didn't have a set agenda, and it took us to this beautiful experience where we just were flowing, where we just had this insight of who we were, of knowing ourselves truly, if even for that moment or those moments in the conversation. And it was like a little miracle. And I think that happened because we were both willing to sort of surrender into the present moment and to just showing up, to being there without needing to decide or control what the conversation was going to be about or where it was going to go. And it was just a beautiful experience. And I would like to live more of my life like that, where things just flow. I mean, it doesn't mean to just literally do nothing, but to be so present in everything that you do that you can witness this presence of God in everything that you do. And then another interaction was I did a healing session. And for me, the healing sessions that I give and share are also very synchronous and very much related to whatever is happening in my own experience as well. So, anytime that I share or give that gift or offering of or service of a healing session, it is actually because there's something within my mind that also needs to be healed. So, remembering that as teachers of God, that if we had learned all the lessons completely, we probably wouldn't even be here. So recognizing that whatever it is that's part of our day, that's part of our curriculum, whoever is asking for help in front of us is also ourselves. It's what we need. It's where we need to show up and to be open to receiving those answers. So, I found that those who share that role with him will find him so they can learn the lessons for the day together. So those interactions, as small examples, were exactly the lessons of the day that we both sides needed to learn together. And then it is always possible to begin again should the day begin with error. And I think that's really great because sometimes I've had the experience in the past where I started the day and I felt a little rushed, like maybe I woke up a little later than I expected and I had some appointments or plans, and it's like I'm so out of sync. And it's not about the circumstances, but about taking that time to really connect and to feel in that total alignment with spirit. And that we have the choice at any point in time. Like if we feel like we're off for that day or something's just not in sync, we can always take that moment to realign and to connect and then to start the day again from there. I find it interesting that it's the saving of time is an essential early emphasis, and then throughout the learning process, the saving of time is less and less emphasized. And it basically talks about how at some stage we do need some structure, but once you get the main teachings from that structured practice period, then it's about actually learning to listen more to the feedback, to the intuition, to the experiences. And for me, I definitely found the benefit of fulfilling the structure of this course in say completing all of the workbook lessons, following the rules, because it's through that you see, one, your own resistance to actually getting it, but two, it kind of makes you really see clearly the difference between these different thought systems. And once it kind of becomes more normal to understand the reversal of the thought system of the world, then it's a lot easier to be aware when you're in it and when you're not. But it does take this period of time, at least in my experience, and probably most people's, that you do need the structured period to be able to have the space to sort of undo the old thought system. And I like that it says that this course is always practical. Because I actually thought it was very impractical when I first started getting into it. Like it just seemed so out there and so radical in a way, based on the thought system of the world or the previous thought system that I was holding on to. But realizing that it is actually very practical. And a couple of examples of that is that, yes, like the duration. I remember when Felipe and I were both doing the workbook lessons, we weren't at the exact same lesson at the exact same time, but we were both committed to doing it. And he would make some comments about, say, duration, like it would have very strict instructions about how much time should be spent. And in general, like we would kind of compare our experiences. So I would see that he would spend like a long amount of time, say at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, where he would sit upright in his meditative posture, but his facial expression indicated that he was actually like upset and angry and almost like trying to like force this meditative experience. And for me, I would not necessarily spend or dedicate as much time to being in meditation or prayer. And for me, though, I found that it was all that I needed. Whatever shorter period of time that I had was perfect for me. And, we would make comments about each other's practices in a way, which was always just a reflection of our own sort of judgments of ourselves. And realizing that, you can't just say it's about the amount of time, because it says one can easily sit an hour with closed eyes and accomplish nothing. And I've also done that before, where it's just like a lot of thought loops and it's not really going anywhere. Not to say that that isn't valuable in a way, that sometimes we need to experience those things too. But I guess the point is to realize when you're like pushing yourself or you're trying too hard to fit into the rules, and then you're out of peace in doing so. Or, like if you're doing a shorter meditation or prayer in terms of time, and then you feel guilty about it, it's like, okay, realize that you're feeling guilty about it, because the whole point of this is to feel forgiven, to feel out of guilt. So I really appreciate that. It's practical in that sense, in that like, here are the guidelines, but ultimately this is your own experience, and you know how you're feeling to be able to modify it in whatever way that you need. So, and yeah, one can as easily give God only an instant, and in that instant join with him completely. And I find that also very practical. If throughout the day you are in a position where you're suddenly so deep in some story or some situation that you feel totally stressed, then you can just remember that it takes an instant to connect again. So, it's not that you have to get away from the situation and have 20 minutes of quiet time to be able to come to the sense of peace, but you can just close your eyes, one instant in your mind to come back. It has saved me many times. It says, it is not wise to lie down for it. It is better to sit up in whatever position you prefer. And also in that period where Felipe and I were both doing our workbook lessons, I often would lay in bed because often these practice periods were in the morning and at night. And I found it just super comfortable to lay down. And he would remind me that it actually says that it's better to sit up. And for me, I noticed that my resistance to sitting up, it had to do with my commitment to being there, to committing, my resistance to commitment to the practice. That in a way, like laying down was sort of an excuse to not fully be present, to not fully show up, and to not fully absorb the teachings. So, yeah. In case anyone has that sort of interaction or that internal debate of, should I lie down or should I sit up? It's not that there's a hard right or wrong, but it might be helpful to look at, is there a reason that you have resistance to sitting up? And I hope that my experience has some benefit for somebody else to realize that they might have resistance as well. And then it says, there's one thought in particular that should be remembered throughout the day. It is a thought of pure joy, a thought of peace, a thought of limitless release. Limitless because all things are freed within it. And again, with the experience with Felipe and me, I noticed my judgment or my observation of him when he would be in this very strict sort of meditative practice is it didn't seem joyful. It seemed a little harsh and stern. And there wasn't a sense of joy with it. It was almost like this, okay, I'm going to be a good meditator and follow the course and sit here for an hour, or however long it was. But, reading that and realizing that it's not about feeling harsh or bad or stern with ourselves, but actually it's about opening us to the experience of pure joy. And so in the same way that it said that one can easily give God only an instant and join with him completely, it's the same thing with the joy. Because if we can allow ourselves to feel that even for an instant, it can free us. So yeah, moving on, it also talks about magic. And there's a chapter in the course that talks more in depth about magic and the use of magic. Personally, I've used a lot of magic, but what this is saying is that at some point you won't need it anymore. And to me, that's kind of like the metaphor of the ladder or the boat, which I had mentioned in a previous section related to bodhisattvas. Let's say everybody is on this ground level, and to get everyone to the next level up, you need to use this ladder to get everybody there. And so once everybody is there, then you actually don't need the ladder anymore. You can actually let it go. So to me, magic is kind of like that, where you realize that magic can be used. It can be useful to getting to this next point in time or level or whatever it is that you want to call the next step of the process. But once you get there, then you actually don't even need the ladder anymore. So you can actually let go of it and realize that it actually is meaningless. And so I see magic as like that, where it's definitely useful for some people, depending on what their sort of curriculum is. But ultimately, it's not really needed. And the funny thing for me was with this specific section, just before I had gotten a tarot deck, and the card that I pulled for the day, and I'd been doing a practice of pulling a card for the day to kind of see what the energies were of the day or what sort of themes I would focus on for the day. And the card that I had pulled was the Magician. And I just laughed so much when I read this section because that was actually the theme that I needed to look at to realize where I'm still holding on to magic and believing that I need it. Because ultimately, we don't. Ultimately, we can just be one with God. But, at the same time, being kind and compassionate to ourselves and others when we realize that it's useful for that period of time, but at some point we can let it go. One last thing about this concept of magic or the ladder is that even this text, you could even say is magic or serves as a ladder, because it's just what we need to get to the point of realization of God or the non-dual experience. But at some point, then you don't even need the text. And so it's not about holding on to magic or holding on to the tools that we need, because ultimately we can let all of it go. So yeah, that's all. And thank you. Bye for now.